Hilchis Pesulei Hamukdashin Perik Shishi. Kol HaZvachim Shenesarev Bem Achas Mechatois HaMesis Eisher HaNiskul Afilu Echad Beribui is Kulon Yemusu. Why? I L'chura should be bottled bereiv. The Lefisha Balichayim Chshuvim Ve'im Beinam B'Telem. It's at the din of Balichayim Chshuvim, therefore they're not bottled. The Im Hikriv, but Lepel, if you were Makriv, in other words, you took one of them and you were Makriv, it is Hursa. She'ein Balichayim Nidachim. So notice the fact that there was a matzav that you weren't allowed to be Makrivit, that's not a problem because Ein Balichayim Nidachim. And on the other end, the Ay L'chura, there's a Shaila, maybe you came to the Chatois HaMesa, the one you're taking is the Chatois HaMesa, so we're saying we go Basarev. Whereas while it was Chai, while it was mixed up together, we're saying Balichayim Nidachim. Mashenkin, now that you are Makrivit, so it's already not Balichayim, so we say that we assume that this is coming Min Harev. Halacha Beis. So this is talking about that is something that's Chatois HaMesis, or Asher HaNiskul, became this Arev with Zvachim, so we say Kulam Yemusa because there's a Chatois HaMesis there, or Asher HaNiskul there. Now whatever, in this Arev Bem Echad Misuri HaMizbeach, you have Zvachim, that not a Chatois HaMesis fell in, but a Yisuri HaMizbeach, something which is also to be Makro Al Gabi HaMizbeach. So mainly you can't be Makriv any of them Al Gabi HaMizbeach because we're afraid there's one of them there that's Yisuri HaMizbeach. It's like, let's say, a Riveya, a Nirva, something which is it's a Deif, something which is also L'Akal HaMizbeach that you can't see. It's not a Balmum. It's Balmum you'd be able to see, but something that's also L'Akal Gabi HaMizbeach, but you cannot see. So the din is Yiru Kulam Achiyipil B'Mum. So then you have to wait till they all get a mum, and then V'Yimachru, they're all sold. Then the Yavi B'Dmei HaYafa Shebem Meisi Amin Shel Kachim Shenezarev. So in other words, there were kachim over there, and there was also something that's Asur El Mizbeach, which is not kachim. So now you go ahead and you sell all of them. So while they were kachim, you're not allowed to sell them. So you have to wait until they get a mum. Then you go ahead and you sell them. So the part that was kachim you sold, and that money is supposed to be given to buy more kachim. The parts that Yisuri Mizbeach, you don't have to use for kachim, they're the Yisuri Mizbeach. So Memela, now the question is how much money did you get for the kachim? So you're not really sure because you're not sure which was the better one. So you have to take from the better ones. In other words, you have to take the more money. Let's say if there would be, let's say, two behemoths. One behemoth is worth 100, one behemoth is worth 75. You don't know which is the one that was, if the kachim was the 100 and the Yisuri Mizbeach was the 75 of fakert. So you have to go ahead and take, so you sell both behemoths, you get 175 for it. Now you take 100 and you buy kachim with it. Because lepel, you're taking, that's midmei hayafishibem, or whatever the amount of karbonis of kachim that you take from, you go ahead and use that for karbonis. The nekudas hadvarim is, in other words, when it's chatois hamesis, there's no eitzah, because they have to die. Mashenka over here, when we're talking with Yisuri Mizbeach, so they don't have to die. The word is you can't be makriv al gabi mizbeach. So you have to see to it that all of them cannot. You're not makriv al gabi mizbeach by getting a mum, and then you could sell it, and then you go ahead and use the money of the kachim, which was taka kachim that had a mum, and that you bring on the mizbeach. That was talking about because it was nisarvul b'isur mizbeach. So you can never end up. In the first case, they have to end up all dying. In the second case, they have to end up that all of them are not going to be go al gabi mizbeach. In the third case, halacha gimel nisarvu kachim b'chulim tmimim. So be'atzim chulim tmimim could go al gabi mizbeach. It's just they're not kachim, so they can become kachim. Nisarvu kachim b'chulim tmimim. So the eitzah is yimachru achulim shebetaruas letzorche esi amin. So you should go ahead and sell the chulim which is in the taruas for the same min of the kachim that was nisarvu, and then the yikru kulim. Then they could all become nikrav. Ketzad. Arba behemoth shlamim. You have 4 behemoth shlamim. Shenisarvu be'arba behemoth chulun tmimim. They were mixed up with another 4 behemoths of chulun tmimim. So as yimachru ha'arba shel chulun lemishu tzarech lahavi shlamim. So you go ahead and you say that there's 4 people that need a shlam. Let's sell 4 out of these 8 karbanos. There's 8 karbanos here. 4 of those karbanos are already shlam. 4 of them are chulun. So you go and sell 4 of the chulun to 4 people that want to have, or to someone that wants to have 4 karbanos of shlam. Knows you can make the chulun to shlam. So yimachru ha'arba shel chulun lemishu tzarech lahavi shlam, and v'yikru al-kel shlam, and everything is brought as shlam. And memela in your makriv each one for shlam, And it's nikra for whoever the bailam are. So I don't care who the bailam are. They're nikra for who the bailam are. V'chein ba'oilo oy ba'asham. The same thing would be if you would have 4 karbanos of chulin and 4 karbanos of oila, or 4 karbanos of chulin and 4 karbanos of asham. So all of it is v'hadamim chulin l'chol davar. The damim that you get for this is chulin l'chol davar, because lepeil you're only selling 4 karbanos, and those 4 you're only selling 4 behemoths, and those 4 behemoths are chulin. So in other words, you have 4 behemoths of kachim, you have another 4 behemoths of chulin. So now you're selling those 4 behemoths of chulin for the kachim, and then you're makriv all the 8 karbanos for those same kachim. So mainly the money that you got for 4 behemoths of chulin, ataka b'chulin, they're chulin dika behemoths, and the people that are buying them are making it into kachim, and then they're being nikriv as kachim. So we have 3 cases of taruvis. You have a taruvis of chatois hamesis in zvachim, so that the chatois hamesis in zvachim so kulin yemusa. There's no eitzah. You have a situation where you have Pesulei Hamukdashin, the Surim Mizbeach, that are Surim Mizbeach that were Nisarvu. So the eitzah is that Yiru Kulim Achipul B'mum, and then you buy it with the kachim. The ones that are kachim, you buy kachim, and you spend with the more money, because you have to buy for the kachim the better behema. And then there's a case where kachim was Nisarav B'chulin, so then you go ahead and sell the chulin for the same type of carbon, like the kachim dausher Nisarvu, that money is chulin, and then you go ahead and you makriv all of them al gabi hamizbeach. Halacha dalet, nis'alev sher hegdish b'shvarim shel chel, a share of hegdish, you have a share of hegdish, and that was mixed in 2 of your shvarim of chel. So the din is gadol shebekulan hegdish. Now it's not like we know that gadol shebekulan is hegdish. It means that we're choishish that gadol shebekulan hegdish, and therefore v'yimachru hashar l'tzorche esi amin. Let's assume a person has a share that's an oila, and that was mixed up with another 2 of shvarim of his, which are not oilas, which are chulin. So he's going to go ahead and sell 2 of those. He has over here 3 behemoths. One of them is already an oila, and 2 of them are really chulin. So he goes and sells the 2 of chulin to whoever wants to buy chulin dika, wants to buy behemoths to bring an oila. So now all 3 of them are going to be oilas. And as we said before, that you're going to be makriv all 3 of them, each one for l'shem it's bailim. Now lepel, how much money are you going to take from the people that are buying it? So you're taking money from them, assuming that the larger one was already hegdish, and that was yours. And the other 2, that's the ones that you're selling. I mean, it's possible you're really selling the larger one. But lepel, you can't take money from them from the larger one, because it's possible that the larger one was already yours and that was hegdish. So that's the taish. Nis'arev sher hegdish b'shvarim shechel. So we like choishish that gadol shebekulan is hegdish. We look at it as if the gadol shebekulan was already hegdish, and b'yimachru ashar, the other ones which are not the gadol, you should sell it tzorche esi amin, and you take from them only the money of the shar, not of the gadol. Now this is talking about until now that it was nisarev hegdish b'chel. So we had a case of chatois hamesis that was nisarev. We had Pesulei Hamukdashin that was nisarev. We have hegdish b'chel that was nisarev. Now nisarevu kachim b'kachim min b'minei. So then is a yikra l'shem ba'alav, is a yikra l'shem ba'alav. Agam, you don't know which one belongs to which one, but we're dealing the same kachim, and it's min b'minei, so each one you haven't seen, whoever the bailam is, that should be the bala carbon. Afal pi she'en kolechem the makar korbani. Now, b'medvar mamurim, that you could go ahead and be magdish the kachim, even though they don't know who's the bailam of the carbon. B'medvar mamurim, the karbonis noshim she'en b'm smicha. So you have if you have a few karbonis that are mixed up, we know that they're all the same carbon, we just don't know who the bailam are. So by karbonis noshim she'en b'm smicha, it's not a problem. Avol karbonis anoshim, but when we're dealing with karbonis anoshim, hail v'chol echad tzarech lismich areish karbonei, there's also a need for smicha. Says harei elo leyikruvu, you can't go ahead and be makriv those karbonis. If they mashal the kachim shenisarvu, and different people own different kachim, and each one is supposed to make smicha on his carbon, so you can't go ahead and be makriv the carbon because each one is mechuyev in smicha. Harei elo leyikruvu ad sheyitin echad chelke lechaveri, unless each one is makriv his. In other words, he gives part of his carbon that they become like shutfim in the carbon. In other words, let's say they both have a carbon oila, and the memela, they become shutfim. This person gives over part of his oila to the other person, and he gives over part of his oila to the other person. Each one knows There's two behemoths over here. Each one is an oila. Each one is transfers ownership on each one's oila. Now the emes is the pashtus. If a person owns an oila, you can't really transfer ownership on that oila. You can't make a shutif in an oila when you already makdish an oila. So that's what Reb Kivega asks. The lechura vaspas. What does it mean that you could be transferred? But over here, it's circumstances where lepel, it's kachim. They're both kachim. So mele, the vice in such a case, there's a musik that you could be able to transfer ownership. Or another option would be achiyipul mum bakel, that all these kachim are yipul b'mum, and then the yimachru, and then they go ahead and sell it, and then you have the money for these kachim, and we know that each one had kachim over there mixed in. We didn't know which one was your behema. Is v'yavi kolechad b'dmei hayafish b'meisimin, since we don't know which one is the better, which one had the better one. So each one has to bring from his own money, from the me'ayafim meisimin. So for example, you had two people, and their oilers were mixed up, and again, one was 100 and one was 75. So there's one eitzah is that they should be, in other words, kilo transfer ownership, that each one should own both. Masha'inki, and there's another option of both of the two oilers are going to go in Yiruachi Istavu. So now we're going to go and sell it, and we'll have 175. Now each one has to bring a carbon of $100 for him, because could be it was his carbon was $100. I only generating 175 for both, so therefore they have to lose they have to bring from their own money. That's this din. Halacha hey. Now, so until now we were talking about there was nisarvu kachim min b'minei. So nisarvu kachim min b'minei. So if there's no need for smicha, so then yikravu l'mishahu. Masha'inkin, if there's a need for smicha, so then it's either you have to transfer ownership, that they should become shutfim in the kachim, and therefore there's no problem, or there's another eitzah that they'll yiruachi istavu, and then you bring new karbanis, and each one has his carbon. Halacha hey, nisarvu min b'sheini minei, kigoin oila b'shlamim. So even though oila and shlam, both of them, the zrikas adam is the same, but lepel, the oila is nikrav complete al gabi hamizbeach, and the shlam is dach nechal, the basar is nechal, so memela is leyikravu. Then the Ram says, afilu kechamura shebehem, shemevim kochel beis apsul. So l'chura, when you talk about an oila and shlamim, the problem is not you're mevim oila, mevim kochel beis apsul. L'chura, the problem is that an oila is kulei kolu, and a shlamim is nechal, so it's l'chura, you can't be makriv l'mashahu. So they want to say the Ramah brings from the Aruch HaShulchan that it's like here you have to add something in the Rambam, and those kigen el v'shlamim is le'yikruvu, that's pashut. And then he says even if l'moshel you have a shlamim and a toida, and l'chura they're both nechal, nevertheless a shlam is nechal l'shleyam v'layla, and v'layla echad, and a toida is only nechal l'yam v'layla, so also is le'yikruvu afilu k'chamur shemem. In other words, almanas, that you should eat it liyem v'layla shem mevi'in kachim u'beis apsula. Doesn't really say this, but that's how he says pshat b'shem the Aruch HaShulchan. Halacha vav u'kshem shem mematim b'zman achilosin. Just like, for example, if it would be a toida and a shlamim, and they were mixed up together, you're not going to be makar of them almanas, that you're going to eat it like a toida because you're being memayed b'zman achilosin. Now lepel, you're only able to eat it liyem v'layla. In other words, one of them is a shlamim, and lepel you're making it that should only be able to be eaten liyem v'layla, is kach emamatim b'achleim. So for example, let's say meiser and abcheru mixed up. So l'chura there's an eight, so go ahead and be makrivit. They're both matona achas keneged hayiseid, and they're both eaten l'shnei yomim v'layla echad. But on the other hand, there's a difference. Abcher is only nechal l'kenim, and meiser l'chaladim. So if you're going to go ahead and be makrivit now, manas you'll say the meiser will only be eaten l'kenim. But nevertheless, you've been mayed b'oichleim, so you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to be makriv kotchim be'efim kazeh, that you're being memayed b'zman achilosan, or you're being memayed b'oichleim. And also v'leibim kem achilosan. You can't go ahead and shecht kotchim al manas that you're going to be memayed in the place where they're going to be eaten. Now, normally the place where they're going to be eaten is the chilik is between Moshel. Kachim Kedoshim are only eaten the Azara, and Kachim Kalim are eaten also in all of Yerushalayim. But whenever l'churi you're changing the Mekem Achilasam, you're also changing Achleim. And those Kachim Kedoshim are only Nechal L'Kenim, and Kachim Kalim are Nechal L'Chaladim. So Mela doesn't really eat anything. So the Ramah brings from the Haram area that Mekayim Achilosim is not going on Korbanos. On Korbanos, that once we already establish Eim Ma'atim Bizman Achilosim, and also Eim Ma'atim B'Chleim, there's nothing to add by saying B'Mekayim Achilosim. So B'Mekayim Achilosim is only adding, for example, you shouldn't mix Truma and Bikurim. Because Truma, even though they're both Lekanim, and they both could be eaten the same amount of time, there's no Hagbol of when you could eat it. But on the other hand, Truma has to be eaten Dafkin Yerushalayim. Masha'enkin Bikurim, Bikurim has to be eaten Dafkin Yerushalayim. Masha'enkin Truma could be eaten B'chol Mokim. So therefore, Eliketzed Yaseh, if they were mixed together, Be'efim Kazed, that if you're going to bring them both, so you're going to be Mayit either Bizman Achleim or Ba'echleim, so Memele Eliketzed Yaseh, Yiru Akel Achipel B'mum. And then the Yimocher Kol Echad Mem Levadi, you should sell them separately, because you want to know what their value is. Because you have to take hayofish them, you have to take each carbon. V'yavi b'dmei hayofish them min zeh, b'dmei hayofish them min acher, and v'yafsed ameis b'beisei. So, for example, if you have two karbanas that were mixed together, let's say talk about a toid and a shlum, so you go ahead and you sell them both. You sell them each separately, and let's say one was worth 100 and one was worth 75. So then you have to go and buy a toida with 100 and a shlomo with 100, because the pshat, because you don't really know which one was worth 100, which one was worth the 75. So therefore, you mafsid ameser mi basic. Halacha zayin. Afal pi shikfa. Now a person was mixed up the oila, let's say in the shlom. He had a mix up of an oila and the shlom. So the din is he has to wait that both of them yipul b'mum, and then he's going to buy an oila and a shlom separately. Is Afal Pi, he had the mix-up of the Oila and Shlom, and he went ahead and he was makriv another Oila. He was mechayiv himself an Oila, and he mixed, and a person was mechayiv himself to bring a carbon Oila. And then he was mafresh an Oila, and he was also had a Psa Shlomim, and his Oila, which he was mechayiv himself originally, and he was mafresh, got mixed up with the Shlom, and then the Vaila, he brought another Oila. He brought another Oila. So, but Lepel Taki brought another Oila. So his chiyuv of bringing an Oila could be fulfilled. But Lepel, he owns a carbon Eila, and that carbon Eila has to be brought al Gavem Mizbech. Aval Bishikvar, Ikriv Eila Shechayiba, Islam Shechayiv Lakrivim. In other words, he committed himself a neder to bring a carbon Eila and to bring a carbon Islamim, and he fulfilled it. But from that aspect, Lepel, he owns an oil, he made an oil, he made a Islam. Is a reis a makriv Medrea Taruv is Eila Acheres Islam Macherim. Lepel, since he was already he already was magdish these korbanos, so these are korbanos that he has to be brought al gabi hamizbeach. So al derech you'll say a person committed himself to bring a carbon, and then he went ahead and he was mafresh a carbon, and then he went ahead and was mafresh another carbon and he brought it. So with the second carbon that he was mafresh, he fulfilled his obligation. But the pill, since he was already mafresh a carbon, so mainly he has to go ahead and bring that carbon al gabi hamizbeach. Halacha ches. Now, until now, we were talking about the two behemoths karbanos were mixed, but there was no issue with chatois hamesis. There's two karbanos that were mixed up, and the question is, how do you bring them? You have to bring them. Do you have to wait to yiru at sheyistavu? Knows if they're the same min, so they can bring them all. If you don't need smicha, and if they're not the same min, so then and there's different dinim, so then you have to wait yiru at sheyistavu, and then you bring a separate karbanos again. So you should know which carbon is which. Now, chatos shnis arva b'shlom. You have a carbon chatos, and you have a carbon shlom, and they were mixed up. So the din is yiru akel at sheipul b'mum. So again, yiru at sheipul b'mum, and v'yavi b'dmei hayafish b'am shlomim, and b'dmei hayafish b'am chatos. Like we're learning until now, you had a chatos and a shlom. One was worth 100, one was worth 75. You wait until they both get a mum, and you go ahead and you buy with 100 of that. You buy a chatos, and then another 100 you buy a shlom, even though you only have 175. You have to add 25 mibasing. Now, what about v'im kodam v'hikriv chatos acheres al chatosish sheifrishalei? In other words, he has a chatos and a shlomim, and instead of waiting until yipul b'mum, and then he's going to buy with that money a chatos, he went ahead and was makriv another chatos. So here is kulon yimusa. Here they die, because over there this chatos has a din of a chatosh is kapra bala. Whereas this chatos over here, which was nis'arav with the shlomim, is lost because he can't bring it as a chatos at this point in time. So it's a din like a chatos shavda. Now he was a gehed who was nischaper with another chatas. So it's a chatas shemesu ba'aleh. It's a chatas shemesu ba'aleh that's mixed up with a shlom. So we learned in the first halacha that a chatas shemesu ba'aleh that was mixed up with another carbon, so it kulam yamusu. So over here also, since this became a chatas shemesu ba'aleh, it's a chatas sheniskaper ba'aleh, so mele is yamusu. V'chein im nisarvu mois chatas b'mois asham. Like a person had mois chatas and he had mois asham, they got mixed up. Is lekeach shtei behemoths. He goes ahead and buys two behemoths. Umechalel dmei chatas b'chol mokum shu al chatas. He goes ahead and he says, in this mixture over here, the dmei chatas and dmei asham were mixed. So he says the dmei chatas shehir should be nischalel on this carbon, and that should be a chatas, and the dmei asham should be nischalel on this carbon, it should be an asham. However, that's only talking about if he wasn't makriv achatas yet. He needs to be makriv achatas. He needs to be makriv anela. He has dmei chatas and dmei asham. So we say that you go ahead and the dmei chatas is nischal on this chatas. However, vim kvar karva chatase, if he was already karva chatase, he knows he has a dmei chatas and then he has dmei asham. They got mixed up, and then he went ahead and was makriv another chatas. He was makriv chatase. So now he has the dmei chatas, which of a chatas which he was already in his copper. So that dom is yelich liyam hamelech, and since that dom is yam hamelech and it's mixed up with the shlomim, so mele is also yelich yam hamelech. So mele v'im karva chatasi yelich kol ha'imois liyam hamelech, because this dam chatas is yelich liyam hamelech. V'im kvar karva ashamei, but if he was already makriv his asham, in other words, he has to bring a chatas, and he has to bring an asham, and then he went ahead and was makrav the asham. He was makrav the asham. So he has dmei chatas and dmei asham, and he was makrav the asham. He wasn't makrav the chatas. So the din is yiplu akel l'nedava. So all that money goes l'nedava, because meiser asham is l'nedava. But the question is, meiser asham is takel l'nedava. If a person has dmei asham, and then he goes ahead and is makrav an asham, so it's meiser asham. Because he has dmei asham, which he doesn't need for an asham, because he was already makriv asham, so that's hipul l'nedava. But over here, there's the dmei chatas and dmei asham. So lepel, he doesn't need the dmei asham anymore. But lepel, there's dmei chatas. Why does the dmei chatas go l'nedava? L'chura, that's l'chatas. So it's a chiddush over here that if he has dmei chatas, I mean, the Rambam brings from the Chazon Yecheskel that he asks, and he tries to answer it. But I'll call upon him, it's like a chiddush, a dvar chiddush, a nachamon. Person has dmei chatas and he has dmei asham. He has dmei chatas and dmei asham, and they're mixed together. So l'chura, from the dmei chatas and dmei asham, he should say that he should buy two behemoths, and the dmei chatas he should be machal on one behemoth, and it'll be a chatas, and the dmei asham he should be machal on another behemoth, be an asham. Now, if lepeli was makriv a chatas, so the dmei chatas becomes meiser chatas, not meiser chatas, rather it becomes mois chatas shniskapru baleh, which is yelich liyam hamelech, and since it's mixed with the asham, so it's also yelich liyam hamelech. So it's also yelich liyam hamelech, which also has to be lechura understood. Since enochinami the dmei chatas is yelich liyam hamelech, but there's also dmei asham over there, and he has a behemoth. Let him say that the dmei asham, which is in this mixture, which is not yelich liyam hamelech, that dmei asham should be nischal on this money, on this behemoth. Since this dmei asham is mixed together with dmei chatas, you can't go ahead and be machal this dmei asham on this. Because you're not buying with the money. You're going ahead and you're buying a behemoth, and now you're saying that there's dmei asham over here, and I want that dmei asham should be nischal on this behemoth. But lapel, you're not going to gain anything. I mean, you didn't really gain anything. You could just be makdish that behemoth. There was no gain. By saying that the dmei asham should be nischal on this behemoth, there was no gain. Anyway, the dmei asham is going to have to go to Liyam HaMelech. So you could go ahead and be Magdish this Asham. You could be Magdish this Asham. It doesn't make a difference. But I'll call upon him. So if it was the Chatash already, the Dmei Chatash Niskapra Baleh, so it goes to Liyam HaMelech. Masha'enkin, if it was the Asham, so the din is that since it's Moiser HaSham becomes the Dava, and even the Dmei Chatas, which is together, also is mixed together. It goes also outside the dog, which is a little bit a chidush, a dvar chidush. So dvar chidush. Halacha yud toida shenis arve b'tumuras. A person had a carbon toida, and then he made a tumur of that carbon toida. So he has the Toida in front of him and the Tmura. So the din is shteim te kravna. They should both. You should be makriv of them both. And v'yonav halechem mimoim. You make the tnufa with the lechem. The Tmura, the seder advarim is you make the tnufa on the imurim plus the lechem, the 4 lechamim. You take 1 lechem of each of the 10 lechamim and you put it on top of the imurim that you make the tnufa with, and you make the tnufa together. So over here also you take both of them together and you make the tnufa with them. Now the ma'ase is in a tmuras teida. There's 2 types of tmuras teida. There's a teida which the teida was a neder, and then there's no chiyuv lechem on the tmura. That's the din. Later on we learn a Pedikud base. If you had a teida that was brought because of a neder, and then you made a tmura of that teida, so then you don't have to bring lechem with the tmura of a teidas neder. Masha'inkin, if you had a teidas nudava, so then, and you made a tmura of a teidas nudava, then you do have to bring lechem. Now here, it's not clear if the Rambam is talking about a tmura which you bring lechem for, or a tmura you don't bring lechem for. L'chura could be either way. In other words, teidas shenasarva b'tmura. So you have a teida and you have also a tmura teida. So the din, and they're mixed together. So shteim tekravna, you have to be makriv them both. And v'yonav halechem mimoim. Now, if we're talking about a tmura which also has lechem, the tmura has lechem, so it's very pashut. So you bring each carbon separately, and you bring the lechem with each carbon separately, because each carbon also needs lechem. If we're talking about a tmura which doesn't need lechem, for example, a tmura of a teidas neder which doesn't need lechem, so then you'll bring the imurim of both of them together. You'll make the tnufa on the imurim of both of them together, and you'll only have 1 set of lechem on top of it, and you'll make it memeli. You know that lechem is with whichever one is the right one. So again, toidishin is arba b'tmurasa. So the din is shteim to kravna, you makriv both of them, and v'yonav halechem imoim, you make the tnufa with the lechem with them. And as we're saying, either with each one separately or with both of them together, only 1 set of lechem. V'kach, im nis'arva toida b'sh'ar zvachim, if a toida was mixed up with other zvachim, afal pi shekarva tidas, even though he was already makriv his toida, is yiru akel achipul b'mum. So we don't know which one is the toida and which one isn't the toida. So yiru akel achipul b'mum, and then the yavi b'dmei ayofa toida acheres. So in other words, let's say if the toida was, if one of these behemoths were worth more than the other. So again, as we say all the time, that when you go ahead and take from the money that you got from both behemoths, so you have to take the larger amount of money for each type of carbon. So Mele Yavi b'dmei ayofa teida acheres, or b'dmei ayofa the zevach acher, and you makriv the teida, and you bring the lechem. Halacha Yudalef. Nis'arva be'el nazar, if lepel this teida was mixed with el nazar, so in other words, if the teida was mixed be'behema acheres with another behema, so then taka you wait ashipul b'mum and v'yavi and then you bring 2 separate karbanas. Then you wait until yipul b'mum, and then you get the money from these behemoths. After yipul b'mum, you sell it, and from that money you buy now the 2 types of zvachim that you have to bring, a toida and the other zevach. Now, what happens if they was nis'arva be'el nazar? They was nis'arva be'el nazar. So a toida and el nazar basically in the seder akrav is exactly the same. The difference is only the el nazar brings 20 lechamim, and the toida only brings 40 lechamim. That's one difference. And there's also by the el nazar there's the zreya b'shela that you give to the kohen, and that's a separate nesina to the kohen, which is not there by a toida. And that zreya b'shela is given to the kohen, and it could only be eaten by the kohen. That could only be eaten by the kohen. So here the chiddush is nis'arva be'el nazar. If a toida was nis'arva be'el nazar, ishteim tikravna, you makriv them both. And v'yonav halechem imoim, and over here the churah means you have to bring all the, in other words, you bring the lechem together with them, but over here you don't know if you should be, with which carbon you should be meinif the lechem of the teida, or with which carbon you should be meinif the lechem of the el nazar. So what you have to do is to take the imurim of the teida and the imurim of the el nazar together, and take the lechem of the teida and the lechem of the el nazar together. You make 1 pile out of it, and you make the tnufa. And negeh the zreya b'shela, you're gonna have to give it to the kohen. You'll have to give the zreya b'shela to the kohen, and it'll only be eaten only a kohen can allow to eat it. And agam l'churei being memayed a little bit b'achilasa, because lepel this zreya b'shela could only be eaten now by the kain. So we say since it's only a small amount and generally the carbon remains intact, so therefore we don't consider that you're bringing kachim lebeis hapsul, and therefore you're allowed to do it. Is nachamos. So if you have three eifanim that the Rambam talks about over here. You have one eifan over here where the toida was nisarva with the tmuras toida. So then again you're makriv both of them, and you yonef halechem imoim. When we learn two eifanim in that, then you have a metzias where nisarva toida b'shar zvachim. So then you have to wait until yipul b'mum, and then you buy with the yafish shabam toida and the other kachim you also buy with the Dmei Yafish Shabam, and then you have a Metzias where Toida and El Nazik are mixed up, and over there you don't have to wait at Shipul B'mum. You can be makriv them both, and you make the Tnuf on the Lechem, as we said, you break the Tnuf on the Lechem together, all the Imurim and the Lechem are all make the Tnufa together, and the Zrei B'Sheli, you have to have them both. Halacha Yud Beis. Pcher Shenasarav B'Pesach. A Pcher that was the Sarav B'Pesach. Now, Beneged, the Seder HaKrova, the Pcher and the Pesach are the same. But as far as the Eifon Achila, they're very different. Pcher Shenasarav B'Pesach. Ishneim Yiru Ach Yipul B'Mum. You should wait until Yipul B'Mum. And V'yochlu K'Pcher. And they should be eaten like a Pcher. What do you mean they should be eaten like a Pcher? Beneged, Pesulei Hamukdashin, the din is that once they get a mum, you could go ahead and sell it. You could even sell it in a regular shlachtus, sell a regular, because that brings up the value of what it's worth. And the mail it comes out that kachim ends up getting more because you sold it. The money that you sold it for went to kachim. So if the din is that after you sell it, that it could be used in a regular shlachtus, so then the value is more. Masha'en kain, if the din would be that you can't sell it in the regular shlachtus, and then the value would be less. So by having this din that you could go sell it, and you could weigh it, you could do all the regular things that you do with a regular animal, that causes the price to be bigger, and ultimately kachim gains from it. B'medvar mamurim regular kachim, where the money that you sold it for is going back to hegdish. Mashenkin a pcher and meiser, when it gets a mum, and you're allowed to eat it, either the kohen is allowed to eat it or the Yisrael is allowed to eat it, there's no money coming back for it. It becomes a bal mum, and then you're allowed to eat it. So in Mela, there's no gain by the fact that you're allowed to go ahead and sell it in a shlachtoy, so you're allowed to go and weigh it. So over there, the din is taki, you're not allowed to. So by a pcher and ma'isa, we learned over there's hagbolas, that over there you're not allowed to go ahead and sell it. You can't go ahead and weigh it. You have to treat it with more respect. So Mela, it comes out over here that you had a pcher and a meiser. That was, a pcher that was nisar b'Pesach. So if it's a Pesach, so taki you'd be allowed to do with it like a regular Pesulei Hamukdashin. But if it's a pcher, you're not allowed to. So the din is, that's what he's saying, pcher shenasar b'Pesach, shneim yiru at sheyipul b'mum, and the yochlu k'pcher lepel, you could only eat it k'pcher, which means you cannot go ahead and sell it in the shlachtus. And v'lomali yikruvu l'chura, the seder hakrav of both of them is the same. Lefisha Pesach nechel l'chaladim at chatzeis. A Pesach could be eaten to any person at chatzeis as long as they're minuyov. And v'hapcher is l'shnei yamim ve'ein nechel l'lekenim. And you can really change the minuyim. While it's alive, you can still change the minuyim. So the meila, but the lepel, a Pesach is nechel chaladim only at chatzeis. V'apcher l'shnei yamim, and ve'in nechel l'kenim. So it'll be a hagbola how you could eat it. If you're gonna eat this Pesach, b'kedushas pcher, you'll only be able to have kenim on it, and you only can be able to eat it at chatzeis. And ve'in mevim kashel beis hapsul, ve'in matan bachilasim. You're not allowed to cause that you should bring kachim beis hapsul, which means you're going to cause it that it should be nicer earlier, and al derazeh being mamayit people that are able to eat it. Halacha Yud Gimel. V'chein, that's what we spoke about a pcher shenasar b'Pesach. V'chein meiser shenasar b'Pesach is also k'shiyipul b'mum is yochel k'meiser, which meiser also has this din. There's a Pesach shenafel b'mum, it has a regular din Pesulei Hamukdashin, but a meiser shenafel b'mum over there has more hagbolas because lepil hegdish is not gaining by taking off those hagbolas. Yeah, hapcher v'hameiser shenisarvu, hapcher v'hameiser shenisarvu is yochel b'mumen. They have to be eaten b'mumen. And really, over there's no din that a pcher has to be eaten. There's a pcher that's a carbon is eaten only lekenim. Masha'enkin a pcher that's not a carbon that's nechel b'mumei could be eaten by anyone. It's just that there's a din. It's a mom and a ken, and you have to give it to the kain. It's at mom and a kain, you have to give it to the kain. So if it's a safik pcher, you don't have to give it to the kain. But I'll call upon him a pcher v'hameiser shenisarvu is yochel b'mumen. They could be eaten b'mumen. They could both be eaten b'mumen. Halacha Yudalit. V'chein sh'ar kotshim shenisarvu b'bcher u'maiser is always the din yiru. Before you spoke about a Pesach, which was nisara b'bcher, or a Pesach that's nisara b'maiser. Now he's saying v'chein sh'ar kotshim shenisarvu b'bcher u'b'maiser is always yiru at she'yipul b'mum and v'yochlu k'bcher shnafel b'mum. A k'maiser shnafel b'mum. And those, they're both the same din. A b'cher and a maiser shnafel b'mum. The din is that you could not go ahead and sell it b'beis hamidbuchayim, or you couldn't go ahead and weigh it, because lepel, it's a bizorin of kotchim. Only by sharp Pesulei Hamukdashin, there was a special heter, because through that you're bringing more money to kotchim. So the mela, when you have shar kotchim, so it's a suffix, maybe it's a b'cher, or a shar kotchim shenisarvu b'b'cher b'maisim, the mela, now it's Pesulei Hamukdashin. You don't know if it's Pesulei Hamukdashin of a regular carbon, or a Pesulei Hamukdashin of a b'cher, so therefore you're not really sure what you're getting the money for. So memela, which one you're getting the money for? So memela, so you're not allowed to eat it. You have to eat it like you would normally eat a b'cher or a maisa which received the mum. Halacha tezvav. Osham shenisarav b'shlam. You have an osham that was nisarav b'shlam. Is aval pi she'ei makrivim mishneyem Elohim murim. Be'emes, but from both of them you only makriv the murim. Aval habasar is nechel. The basar is nechel sai of the osham and sai of the shlam. But again, the shlamim, the chaz of the sheik is nechel lekanim, and the rest of the basar is lebailim. But again, osham, it's all eaten lekanim. Is lei yikravu el yiru achiyipul b'mum v'yavi b'dmei hayafa osham u'b'dmei hayafa shlam. You go ahead and you wait until they both get a mum, and then you sell them both, and then for the amount of money that was received for the larger animal, you go ahead and you buy an osham. For the amount of money that was, again, received for the larger animal, you go ahead and buy a shlam, even though you don't have both that money. You have to add extra money. V'hameser, and the extra money is yapsid mebesei. V'imkod, that's talking about if he wasn't makriv and oshim yet. However, v'imkod and v'hikriv hashamei, so then is shneim yiplu l'nedava. So over here again you have to understand. In other words, nachamol, you have over here a carbon oshim and a carbon shlamim that was nisarvu. And now you go ahead and you're selling them. They both received a mum. And now you have the money that you got, sai for the oshim that had a mum, and sai for the shlom that had a mum. And they're mixed together. They're together. Now you go ahead and you will makriv your oshim. So if a person has money of an oshim, a person was mafresh an oshim, and then that oshim had a mum, and he went ahead and he sold it, and he has the money for that oshim. And then he goes and brings another oshim. So that's an osham sheniskapru ba'olav. So the dmei osham sheniskapru ba'olav is yavi dmei nedava. That's the din. So the moisera osham is l'nedava. So over here also the moisera osham is l'nedava. But over here you don't only have the moisera osham. Over here you also have the dmei osham that was nisarva b'dmei shlam, and the dmei shlam is yavi b'dam of shlam, dam of shlam. So over here we're saying up sanachadin that again that since this moisera osham, you have to understand, since the moisera osham was not the Meiser Osham. In other words, this Osham was Nisara with the Shlam, and then you went ahead and sold them both. And so now you have money, which really you should buy an Osham and a Shlam. As we said before, you and now you go ahead and you were makriv an Osham, so the Dmei Osham, L'chura is Taka Meiser Osham, but L'chura, the Dmei Shlam is not Meiser Osham. Nevertheless, the Rambam says, V'im Kodam v'hikriv Hashamei, Ishneyem yiplu l'nedava, which needs beer. The Rambam said it's similar in halacha tes, that he says also at the end of halacha tes, v'im karva hashamei, so then is yiplu hakel l'nedava. And over there was talking about that there was a mixture of an osham and a chatos. Halacha tes zayin. Kol hakochim, efshe she is arvu min b'min. It says b'min b'min, it means min b'min. In other words, you can have a mixture. An oil can get mixed with a shlamim, because an oil is a zachar always, but a shlam could be either a zachar or a nekeva. Chutz min achatas im osham. Achatas can never be mixed with an osham. Why? She'ena osham ela mizichri kvasim. An osham could only be a zachar of kvasim. In other words, it could be either an ayil or even of a keves, but it has to be a zachar. Im zichri kvasim. Ve'en lucha chatas min akvasim. El in the cave. A chatos, when it comes min akvasim, could only be in a cave. There could be a mitzias of a zachar, but a chatos, mashal a s'ir chatos. A s'ir chatos could be a zachar. but that's a soir, not a kevis. An osham is always a kevis and a zachar. An osham is always a kevis and a zachar. Normally, an osham is an ayil. It's not kevis, it's an ayil. It's been Banshnosayim. There's a Metzias of Hashem, the Metzera, and Hashem Nazir, which is a kevis, but it's a kevis, a zachar. Masha'inkin, a chatos could never be a kevis. A chatos could be a kizba, a chatos could even be a par, a chatos could be a soir of a nasi could be a soir, but a chatos could not be a kevis. It can never be a kevis. A chatos and osham can't get mixed. But l'moshel, let's say an osham and an oila could get mixed, even though an osham and a chatos. An osham and a chatos can't get mixed. But an oil and a chatos could be mixed, even though an oil is always a zachar. But an oil could be a zachar also of a soir. So you could have a soir, a zachar, to bring as an oil, and that could get mixed up with a soir of a chatos. Halacha Yud Zayin. V'chol elo hamisarvin b'chayim. They got mixed up b'chayim. Im hikriv, if they were makriv, you didn't know which one it is. So normally you're supposed to, let's say, yirat sheistai, but lepel, if you were makriv, and it's a suffix, is hurtza. Shein ba'lichayim nidachim. Now the reason why it's hurtza, the Ram goes always l'shita say that if a suffix it was hurtza, we say hurtza. That's the general din that the Ram keeps saying. But l'chura, there was a matzav, you weren't allowed to be makriv, so l'chura, let's say it was dachui. So now we have to come on to this extra din, that the fact that it was a matzav, that you weren't allowed to be makriv, it doesn't cause that it should be considered dachui. Halacha Yudches. Behemo shnimtzas mirushalayim va'ad Migdal Eder, and knows the distance outside Yerushalayim until Migdal Eder, ukemidosu l'chol ruach, and that same distance to all sides of Yerushalayim. If you find the behema outside Yerushalayim, as far as the distance would be from Yerushalayim to Migdal Eder. So, im nekeva bashnasi, if it was a nekeva within its first year, is koinso likipa achatomo shemachatasi. Now we assume, when we find a behema, we assume that if it's a carbon, it was hugdash lately. In other words, it's not the pshat where choishish that maybe it was hugdash when it was a year old, and now it's 2 years old, and memela it's still the same carbon of what it was a year ago. We assume that if it was hugdash lately, and it was found not long after it was hugdash. So that's it. If this is an akeva bashnas, it's a behema that's 2 years within its first year an akeva, so it's possibly it could be a chatos. So the din is koinsul likipa achatomus shemachatasi. So you're koinsul likipa achatomus shemachatasi because it might be a chatos. Now hoise b'shtayim, if it was already 2 years old, so mainly it can't be brought as a chatos. It's obviously not a chatos. And again, we're not choishish that maybe it was a chatos and it's already here for a while. Hoise b'shtayim. So now we're choshish, maybe it's a shlam. Yiviyan a shlam. You should bring it as a shlam. V'yavi, and also v'yavi imo lechem. You should bring lechem with it, because shema teidi, maybe it's a carbon teida. Now the emphasis, if it's not a carbon teida, so really you shouldn't be bringing this lechem into the azor. You're not supposed to bring lechem of chulun into the azor. If it's not a carbon teida, the lechem is not going to become niskadish. But nevertheless, the chacham knows only Yisur the Rabbanon to bring this lechem into the azara. So therefore, the chacham will make it. Since you're bringing it in order in case it's a teida, so mainly they will make it. So you have to bring it as a shlam, and you also choishish maybe it's a teida, so you bring the lechem with it. So that's if you found a behema which is a nekeva bashtay. Now motzah zachar ben shtei shanim. If you found a zachar which is ben shtei shanim, so here is only takana. Why? Because shema ashmu. Maybe this behema is an asham, and vadayin likipru ba'olav, and the male is takanoshim. So you can go ahead. In other words, if you're going to go ahead and let's say wait until yirat sheyipul b'mum, so that money also has to be brought as an asham. In other words, if we'd assume that the asham, the kipru ba'olav, so if yirat sheyipul b'mum and yipul damav l'nedavik, the meser asham. Masha'inkin, it could be that it's still an asham. So male, if you're going to go ahead and let it, that it should be yipul b'mum, so then that money is going to be money that's supposed to be for an asham. So male, there's really no takana. There's no takana what to do with it. In other words, could be you could go ahead and let it achiyipul b'mum and then take that money and throw it to Le'amar Melech. There's nothing you could really do with it. You can't be yipul dumbel l'nedava. You can't bring it as an asham because maybe it was already yakipru b'olav. So then that asham is going to be chulun bazar. So there's nothing really you could do if you find a Zocher ben Shtei Shana. Now, what's a Zocher ben Shana? If you found a Zocher ben Shana, is Minichi Achipul B'mum. And now you don't know. You don't know what it is. It's an oil or a shlama. Is maybe Shtei Behemoths Tachta. From this money that you took the Zocher ben Shana, you bring 2 behemoths. Or Masna Behemoth, you make a tnai. Im Elohaya, if the money, if this behemoth that you found, which was the Zocher ben Shana, was an oila, is that oila Tachta. So this is going to be an oila in its stead. Im Shlam Haya, and if it was really a Shlam, is that Shlam Tachta. So this is really a Shlam in its stead. So since it's really not his oila, so the din is that the nesachim of this oila comes mishal tzibur. Va'acher shlam, and the other one he brings as a shlam, and im alechem because shem teidahaya, shem teidahaya. Maybe it was a teida. So again, if a person finds a behema that's a zocher ben shana, so he doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know if it's a carbon oila. Could be it's a carbon oila, and carbon it's a carbon shlam. So he can't bring it as either. So what he does is he is yirachi yistayev. He waits till he gets a mum, and then he goes ahead and takes with the money and he buys sayan oila and saya shlam. He buys sayan oila and saya shlam, and he says, if it was really an oila, so this money is going for this oila, and if it was really a shlamim, so this money is going for the shlamim, and the oila he's bringing as a carbon ledava. He's bringing as a carbon l'shlamim. Now, if it was really a shlam, you don't know what kind of shlam. Was it a shlam or a taida? So then he's going to have to bring lechem, just like we said before. That when he finds something that's bashtayim, so he has to bring shlamim. He has to bring it with lechem, because maybe it's a shlam. So over here, whereas a shlam could be either a ben shana or a ben shnasayim. Yeah, umakre v'echad oil, nesachim shel tzibur, v'achar shlam, malechem shem atayda oil. Umaya asa bazanim. So now we said he goes ahead and waits till sheipel b'mum. And then he take. Now we spoke about what you did with the money of the behemoth that was nafal b'mum. Now what do you do with the behemoth itself that nafal b'mum? Is yachal b'mumei. So then it eats. Then you eat it b'mumei. Shafilo hayabcher a meiser da b'mumei yunachal. Even if it was a bcher meiser, could have been maybe a bcher meiser, because we're talking about a zocher ben shana. But nevertheless, if it's a bcher meiser, it's da b'mumei lunachal. And even when Pesach, who maybe it was a Pesach, is the acher zmani who is a shlam. And maybe it's still a Pesach Bizmani. What happens if you found it on Erev Pesach Mamish? So we say, no, Hakel. Ubizmane Hakel Nizharim. So in other words, we can't assume that it was actually a carbon Pesach that you found. So again, you find a Zocher Ben Shana, so we assume it's either an Oila, where we're Choshish, either it's an Oila or a Shlam. You have to be Choshish on both Stodim. That maybe it's an Oila, maybe it's a Shlam. Later, tzad that it's an Oila, so you bring it as an, so you bring the carbon Oila for that. And like the tzad that's a shlam, you bring a shlamim, and maybe it's a taida, so you have to bring lachmi taida. and lepel, the actual behemoth is eaten b'mumei. The pashtus, it has to be eaten kipcheri maisa, which means you cannot go ahead and sell it, and sell it b'midbachayim, as we said before, because it's a maisa or a b'cher, and mele, it has there's no heter of going ahead and selling it b'midbachayim, or to go ahead and weigh it on a scale. Yeah, umay yasa bezan nimtzo nachamol yachal b'mumei shafilo hayabcherim meiser da b'mumei hu nachal. There's a possibility that it's a b'cherim meiser. Being Pesach achar zmani, there's another possibility that it's a Pesach achar zmani. There's also that is a shlam. So we covered that possibility because we're bringing a shlam as well. Maybe it's a Pesach bizmani. Let's say if you found it mamish on Erev Pesach, so we say no bizmani akel nizharim be. So memela, we don't assume that someone's going to lose a carbon Pesach Erev Pesach. Maybe this will another possibility. We're talking about that it's a zocher ben shana. We learned that in a mitzeir and an osham, their osham is a ben shana. Normally an osham is ben shtayim, but a nazir and asham nazir and asham mitzeir is ben shtayim, ben shana. So maybe it's asham mitzeir, so that's a problem. So that he says no, einam mitzuyim tamid. That's not really a regular thing to have an Asham Noz and Asham Mitzeda. And Leficha Lichashalim, to be choished that this behemoth, which is the Zocher Ben Shana, is an Asham Mitzeda, or Asham Noz is very far. So therefore we could assume that it's either an Oila or a Shlam. It's either an Oila or a Shlam. It also could be a Cher or a Maisa, that's another possibility. So by the fact that you're going ahead and selling it b'mumei, and taking the money, and then going ahead and buying an Oila and a Shlamim, and then with the shlamim buying lechamim, so you covered, so to speak, all the possibilities, and mamela you don't have to worry about it. So until now, we're talking about that things were mixed up while they were alive, and you don't know what to do. So the question is, could you be makar of it, or do you have to wait until they get a mum, and then will you take the money? And the question is, what you buy. That was all the different possibilities of what happened when they were mixed up b'chayim, before they were shachled. Halacha yutes nisarvu kachim b'kachim achashim nishketu. So you have kachim and kachim that when the sarva achashim nishketu is yochel kechamer shebem. Over here is pasha that you have to eat it kechamer shebem. So you know that you have kachim kalim and kachim kadoshim, they got mixed up. So you have to eat it dafka through kenim and dafka bazar, and dafka according to the amount of time that you were allowed to eat the chamer shebem. Nisarvu b'Pesulei Hamukdashin, if kachim and Pesulei Hamukdashin got mixed up. Oy b'chulin shenishchetu ha'bazar, which again is not allowed to be eaten. So then it's to ubar tzurasim. You have to wait until there's to ubar tzurasim, which means there's lino, so it has a din of noiser, and then the eitzel beis hasefer, and then they're burnt. You can't eat it because it's a suffix Pesulei Hamukdashin. It's a suffix chulin shenishchetu ha'bazar. On the other hand, you don't burn it because maybe this is kachim. That's not a problem. So mainly you wait until tu b'tzurasim, which certainly now is a chi of sreifa, and then the eitzel beis hasreifa. Halacha Chav, Evrei Chatos, Shenis Arvu be'Evrei Eila. So again, Evrei Eila is Ala Mizbech, and Niktar Ala Mizbech, Evrei Chatos are eaten. So Evrei Chatos, Shenis Arvu be'Evrei Eila, is Manichan Akel Achi Yipostu, V'tu B'tzurasim, and as you wait until they become nicer, and V'serfen Eisen Bazar, B'mark Makim Sheserfen Pesulei Hamukdashin. They have it, you force it to become Pesulei Hamukdashin. Pesulei Hamukdashin, either they're nicer, or they are noiser b'negei the Evrei Oila, which should have been brought al gabe mizbech, and they weren't brought al mizbech. Halacha chafalev Evrei shebali mumen shenesarev be'Evrei kachim. In other words, you had kachim that you shechted bazara, and some of them were there was a kachim that was a balmum, and now you have the ivarim of a behema which we know was a balmum, and then you have the ivarim of kachim which weren't balimum, and all those ivarim were mixed up. Ever shebali mumen shenesarev be'Evrei kachim. Afilo Ever be'elef ivarim. You have elef ivarim of kachim which weren't balimumen, and you have one Ever of a kachim which was a balmum, and that kachim are not allowed to be used. Niktar ala mizbeach is yetzu hakel lebeis hasreifa. Everything should go lebeis hasreifa because each one knows that there's no din of bittul over here. We're not considering it bottle, and therefore they all go lebeis hasreifa. Va'afilu karvi kulam. We're talking about if they were all makar. You were makar of all of them. Chutz me'echad menatarovis. He had 1,000 pieces, and one of them was from a balmum, and you were makar already all of them except for one. So the din is hareze yisarev ba'azara b'makom shesei from Pesulei Hamukdashin. We say that this is also it's a suffix that maybe it's an aver from a balmum, and memela so it's nisraf. B'kitzur, if there's an aver of a balmum that's mixed up with other ivarim, so all of them have to be burnt. And even if most of them, except for one even, was already nikrav al gabe mizbeach, so the last one, if there's one left, you say that since it's a suffix, maybe it's an aver of balmum, so in Mela it's not nikrav al gabe mizbeach. I'm not really sure what's the chiddush if there's one left. And all the l'chura, you have all of them, each one of them is supposed to be nisraf. L'maynaf kimina, the fact that you already makrav all of them. Because normally we have a din that when you take one out, so we assume that there's a suffix, maybe the Isser is not left anymore. So here also, since everything was taken out already, so Mela, there's a strong svara to say that the Isser is not left anymore. Nevertheless, we say no, that it's Yisarif. Halacha Chav Beis. Chatiches Kochi Kadoshim, Shenes Arev Bechatiches Kochim Kalim, Ea Necholum Leimechad B'Necholum L'Shnayom, is always Ya'ochlu Kechomer Shabem. You have to eat it like the Chomer. So in other words, you eat it like Kochi Kadoshim, or you eat it like Kochim Kalim, which is Necholum only Liyei Mechad, which is like a Teidev El Nazar. In other words, you always go according to the Chomer. Chatich Halacha Chav Gimel. Chaticha Shel Chatos Tmeya. Shenes Arva B'Meya Chaticha Shel Chatos Tehira. So you have a piece of chatos, and one piece is tamei, and there's another 100 pieces of teira. And the same thing would be prusa shalechem aponim shenitma, which in this arva b'meya prusa shalechem aponim tari. So over here there's a din of bittul areze talek mishabiyana betrumas, just like by trumas the din is that if in this arva one in meya, so the din is it's bottle, so it becomes bottle. If truma in meya of chulim becomes bottle. And al derazeh, if there's truma tmeya in truma tehera, so there's one, so it's nisarav in 100 of tehera, so it's bottle. So the same thing over here, the chticha shel chatas, which is tame, which is nisarve mea chatichas of chatas, which is tahira. So the din is that it becomes batal. We're talking about a chaticha. Aval chaticha shel chatas shenisarve mea chaticha shel chulin, and v'chein prusa shel lechem aponim ator shenisarve b'mea prusa shel chulin. So over here is arei l'layala, because what b'negeya the chaticha shel chatas, which is tamei and toher. The question is should anyone eat it or no one should eat it? Because the question is over here, is a kohen allowed to eat it? So on that we say that the bittul helps, and therefore a kohen is allowed to eat it. But over here, when we're talking about a chaticha shel chatas and chulin, so the kohen anyway is allowed to eat it. The question is to use this bittul that also a Yisrael should be able to eat it. So over here we say that since it's kachim, so you don't exercise this bittul in order to let a Yisrael eat it. That's what we're saying about chaticha shel chatas shenesarve b'mei chaticha shel chulin v'chein prusa shel lechem aponim ator shenesarve b'mei prusa shel chulin. So b'negei truma we do say that it's yalav echad umei, and then even Yisrael is allowed to eat it. But b'negei kachim we say that you don't go basa this bittul. This bittul is only used if it's a question of the tummy b'tor, in order to let it to be eaten. Mashenkin, if it could be eaten anyways by a kohen, so you don't exercise this bittul. Is harei liyalu eliyochel akel likenim kechol hamedumois, like as anything that's meduma, even though by meduma taka wouldn't be, by normal truma it wouldn't be meduma, but over here we give it a din of being meduma.